from Rixie. This is Debuff, and I'm your host, Steve Skeels. Today I'll be talking about Nintendo's Indie World Showcase, Mortal Shell, Black Myth Wukong, and the DC Fandome announcements, including Gotham Knights and Suicide Squad. Unfortunately, we are still waiting with bated breath for a real Nintendo Direct to appear and tell us what Nintendo's been working on. But in the meantime, we've got another Indie World Showcase to tide us over. On August 18th, Nintendo premiered their first Indie World since March and was full of interesting games, including a few I'm very excited about. They opened up with Hades from Supergiant Games, so I think now's a good time to give a quick shout out since I've been playing this game recently on PC. It's from the creators of Bastion, Transistor, and Pyre, and I hope by now most people know that these guys only make bangers, and Hades is no exception. This is one of the best roguelikes I've played. It's great fun, and they've done a fantastic job at having an actual narrative, which is something most roguelikes do not do very well, and I know that can turn off some people. So if that sounds good, you should check it out. Hades is the only game here that I've actually played, so as usual, I'll just point out some of the games I find interesting. Spiritfarer is an interesting management game that I've seen a lot of people talking about. You journey around the sea on your ship, caring for spirits before they are ready to move on into the afterlife. It seems pretty cool, but I'm not really into these type of games. I just wanted to mention it since it seems like it's gotten pretty popular. Next is Takeshi and Hiroshi, which is an RPG where you play as an older brother and game designer who must tweak the difficulty of his game to give his little brother the best experience. I think the art is great, and it sounds like a really unique experience. I haven't played it yet, and I know it's been out on iOS for, half a year or so I'm sure you can go find out a lot about the game if this catches your eye. Torchlight 3 was shown here, and I guess that's apparently an indie game, which I did not know, but I guess indie is really just defined by the size of the studio and budget. Either way, this game is coming to Switch, and it's a great Diablo-style action RPG that I know a lot of people enjoy, though Torchlight 3 is currently in early access, and I don't think it's being received as well as 2 was. Then there is Evergate, which is a beautiful-looking puzzle platformer that at first glance seems to draw inspiration from Ori, but I think it appears to be more like Celeste or those types of games. And either way, it looks like it's a good challenge if you like these types of puzzle platformers. And last, I just wanted to give a shout out to a game I've already talked about, which is Haven, an RPG about a couple trying to make their way off a desolate planet. You can play it solo, and you have to control both characters in real time, or you split it up in a co-op experience. I think the game looks great, and it's really cool how the combat system works, both as a solo player or in co-op, so I'm excited to try this out. So yeah, there was a lot here that I didn't get to. I think the Indie Showcase was great. I love these smaller titles, and it's good to see what else is coming out, but I do understand that a lot of people are just waiting for more from Nintendo themselves. I still think it'll be a while. I know there's a rumor of one coming maybe this week, but I wouldn't hold my breath. So check out some of these games while you wait. Mortal Shell is the next Souls-like game that a lot of people are hyped up about right now. The game released on August 18th and currently has a 77 on Metacritic with about a 6.8 user score. From developer Cold Symmetry, Mortal Shell is a bit of a smaller experience, which is unsurprising since they're only a team of 15. And I'll say this is awesome for such a small team. They deliberately chose to limit their scope in order to put out a tight, highly polished experience, rather than something more expansive but potentially shallow. Which obviously sounds like the right decision to make, but with the game currently averaging about 10 to 15 hours to play through, I feel like some people may find themselves wishing for more and criticizing the game for it. I've only had the chance to play a couple of hours so far, but I've really enjoyed what I've seen, and I think they absolutely nailed the atmosphere. One of my favorite streamers who plays a lot of these games is Fightin' Cowboy, and he described it as a Souls Junior, and I think that's an apt description. Again, it's a smaller experience, but they've done a really good job at nailing the feel of the Dark Souls games. A lot of these Souls-like titles come out, and they take a lot from the combat design, but don't really do anything to nab the feel of the Dark Souls games. It's really about the world building and just pretty much the lack of storytelling and those types of things that people feel like they really get drawn into. And the combat, of course, is awesome, but I think From Software does a few things that makes their game stick out from the rest. And right now, Cold Symmetry is probably the closest that I've seen to nailing that experience. The game does have its own ideas as well, which I have found to work well for me so far. Instead of creating a build for yourself with stat points, there are 4 shells that you find in the world. The shells are basically armor of fallen warriors, and when you possess them, you will take on the traits of that warrior. You will unlock skills tied to the armor as well that create a more specialized build, and I almost like this a bit more than leveling up stats, like in the Souls games and many other action RPGs, because it feels like you actually understand what your points are going towards, rather than just a slow increase in the few numbers that you pick in order to wield whatever weapon or armor you want. And speaking of the weapons, there are only 4 melee weapons and 1 ranged weapon in the game. Similar to the shells, you will find all of these and choose what you want to specialize in. You can upgrade all the weapons in different ways to unlock new abilities and increase damage, of course. I do like the variety in the weapon types, and I do understand that it isn't possible for them to have a ton of weapons in a short game like this. So the fact that they made each weapon very unique, I think, is the better choice overall. The most interesting mechanic that this game brings about to kind of put its own identity on it is probably the harden ability. You don't get a shield, but you can harden at any time, even mid-attack or while you're dodging. This allows you to tank hits for a second, and it does have a cooldown, so you can't spam it. There are also some attacks that will basically break through this. But I think this is key to the game, as it allows you to be more aggressive, and it fixes the issue that some of the Souls-like games have, where you might be attacking at the same time as an enemy, and then you just get wrecked. Sometimes you can dodge out of them, but if you're not quick enough, you basically get destroyed. It's pretty cool that you can do that. You see that they're coming at you, and then you basically press the button, tank the hit, and continue on with your combo. It's also a lot easier to use than the dodge, so for some attacks, if you're mid-attack or you're running up towards the enemy, instead of dodging out of the way, you can just stay still and tank it. The only real complaints I've heard about the game so far is, of course, the game length, and there's a bit of jank in the game. I mean, I think all these kinds of games typically have this, but I've noticed some weird bugs or glitches with the enemy AI or the camera breaking and not working super well, especially when you get knocked down. But I think the biggest thing that I've really heard is a lack of variety, which I don't really know about yet since I haven't gotten far enough, but it could be that the length of the game makes it all blend together, but it also could be that with such a small team, maybe they did kind of have to reuse a lot of assets and enemy types. I'll have to see for myself, but that's something I've definitely heard about a bunch. Either way, like I said, I've been really enjoying the game so far, and I think a lot of people that are fans of these games will enjoy it. And at $30, I can't really complain. Smaller experience for half the price of a normal game seems like a deal to me. The Chinese studio Game Science just announced their next title, Black Myth: Wukong. Their only other game is a dead title called Art of War: Red Tides, a multiplayer strategy game that launched in early access in 2016. I'm not exactly sure what happened to it, as I only heard about it when looking up this game, but what I can say is that Black Myth: Wukong looks awesome. It's going to be a single-player action RPG for consoles and PC, with cloud platforms being considered. This game is obviously drawing from Journey to the West, which is, of course, one of the most famous Chinese novels there is. The main character is Sun Wukong himself. For those that don't know, he's the inspiration for Goku in Dragon Ball. The announcement came alongside a 13-minute gameplay trailer and another 3 minutes of scenery footage. And I just gotta say, this is how you announce a game. It looks really good. The graphics and art direction are high quality, the animation looks smooth, and I think the gameplay looks fun as hell. At the risk of beating the term to death even more, the combat definitely draws on the Souls-like formula, but it seems a lot more agile, and that's in a different sense than even Bloodborne and Sekiro. At least from what I saw, it looks like you have the ability to control a bit more of the combat flow than you can in the From Software games. Armed with his magical staff, Wukong zips around the field beating enemies down. It highlights his acrobatics well, with the dodge appearing to be important to combat, and some of the attack animations being pretty difficult maneuvers for a standard person to do. Not something you would probably see in any of the Souls games. Additionally, he looks like he has some special abilities. You see a parry-type force field that he pops up in order to block an enemy's attack. a shadow clone ability, and some other attacks that appear to use up the magic bar as well. True to the original story, he's got his transformation ability, and it looks like a key component to the game. He can turn into a beetle and fly around to avoid enemies, or he can turn into a big ape to decimate groups of enemies. There's some other things in there, like one transformation that appears to be linked to a weapon that's picked up at the beginning of the gameplay demo, but I don't really know exactly what's going on there. For context, in Journey to the West, he's got, 72 transformations he can do, so I'd expect to see a lot more. The gameplay trailer also shows off some short clips of different areas of the game, demonstrating the variety that we should expect to see. And within these clips, there's also Wukong flying on his Nimbus Cloud, which is interesting to me because that may imply a large map, maybe an open world. It's too early to say, and the gameplay area that was shown did not really look super open, so I don't really know what that's going to entail. Now, other than what was shown, we don't really know anything, but it's still awesome we got to see such a big chunk of the game on a first announcement. Game Science has said nothing about a release date yet, only making a reference to the story saying that it should not take 500 years. They did say it's also going to be a one-time purchase title, but potentially will have DLC or in-game purchases for things like cosmetics, nothing that will actually boost your power. And even if the game takes years, I am just happy to see more. I'm excited to see Chinese-made games coming out, and I love that this draws from their classic literature. Hopefully, we don't have to wait too long to find out anything else. Last up is the DC Fandome, where we got to take a look at Gotham Knights and a cinematic trailer for Suicide Squad, Kill the Justice League. Gotham Knights got me really excited. I think it looks different from any of the Arkham games, but definitely similar enough that fans for those games should still be excited about this. The trailer shows members of the Bat family getting a code black message, with Bruce getting on camera to say that this means he's dead. The Batcave has been blown up by him, and this message was triggered to go out. Basically, he just needs the rest of the Bat family to protect Gotham. And this means it will include playable Nightwing, Batgirl, Robin, and Red Hood. The game will contain many characters from Batman's Rogues Gallery, including Mr. Freeze, who has already been shown off, but the big reveal in the trailer is that this game will contain the Court of Owls, presumably as the big bads. This was already rumored, but a confirmation is nice, and for those that don't know, the Court of Owls is basically a shadow organization that has controlled Gotham for centuries. They're totally badass and should make for a good story. They aren't used too much as they're relatively new, only coming out in the last decade, and I feel like a lot of games and other media like to focus on the more well-known enemies that Batman faces. And as one note, I would also suspect that Batman is not dead, not just because nobody ever dies in comics, but in the Court of Owls storyline, Batman is trapped in a labyrinth for over a week, so if something similar happened, I could imagine him triggering the code black and just setting up the events of the game. I did see some people upset that there is no Batman in a Batman game, so I just wanted to mention that because I would assume that he might show up somewhere, maybe in the endgame or for some DLC, but a lot of people also love members of the Bat family, like myself, and with co-op, I think it makes a lot more sense to focus on them. What was really awesome is they actually put out some gameplay for this, and I think it looks fun. The combat looks similar-ish to the Arkham games, though this is going to have some RPG elements, and it looks like it could play into those a bit more. Not just because of the levels and damage numbers we saw, but the combat looks slightly more like an action RPG where you combo the hell out of someone for big damage, rather than what the Arkham games did with that timing-based rhythm combat, they're calling it. So I don't know. I didn't get to play myself, I don't really know how it's going to feel, but either way, it still looks pretty cool. And I'm alright with it. We've already had 4 Arkham games, so I think they're down to change it up. They definitely show each character is going to have their own combat style and abilities, and the developers mentioned that you'll have the ability to customize the character's builds, so I assume there will be things that will allow you to focus on stealth, gadgets, or just the regular melee combat. And overall, the design of the characters and the world looks great. Looks awesome in my opinion, and again, the combat looks pretty fun. Personally, I prefer single-player games, especially for games like this, Batman, but opening it up with the Bat family, I think it'll be cool. I just hope they don't have to sacrifice anything to really have that co-op experience. But we'll probably find out more soon. The game comes out next year and is launching for PC, PlayStation 4 and 5, and Xbox One and Series X. After Gotham Knights, they showed off a trailer for the new Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League game. And it's about what I expected. I think the trailer looked really cool, but it didn't tell us a whole lot about the game that we didn't already know from the poster, other than a little bit more about the characters. The game will star Harley Quinn, Deadshot, Captain Boomerang, and King Shark as playable characters who are given the mission to take down the Justice League. Shows them fighting off some enemies I don't recognize, and ends with Superman lasering a soldier in front of them. His eyes are glowing purple, which should signify he is probably being mind controlled. I can't really find a source for it, but there are a bunch of outlets saying that this is Brainiac's doing, which I guess would make sense, and I'm pretty interested in that. Brainiac's a cool villain, and I wasn't really sure how they'd do it. I know before I said maybe Parallax, but I think Brainiac would be a lot cooler. Presumably, it's all the Justice League that's being controlled, based on the title of Suicide Squad Killing the Justice League, and the fact that if the Suicide Squad is the only group called in, then it's either super secret or there's nobody else. And I think it's a cool choice to go with them as the main characters, though I do hope that they add more, maybe with DLC, or maybe we just haven't seen the rest of them. I think people will want to see more villains to play as. I mean, Harley Quinn, Deadshot are pretty big ones, but I think it'd be cool to have some others thrown in there if they can. The only thing that is pretty strange to me is that they're calling this a third-person shooter. I don't quite know how I feel about that. If it's going to actually be a straight-up shooter, that doesn't really catch my interest, but maybe that's just the easiest thing to call it, since maybe it's not exactly a action RPG or something like that. So, we'll see. It will be playable solo or with up to 4 people in online co-op. And so far, there's no mention of it being a games as a service model, though that's already been rumored, so maybe they just haven't said anything yet, since the game apparently won't be out until 2022. Yep, there's going to be a lot of time on this, and I probably wouldn't expect to see a lot of gameplay anytime soon, but at least they're talking about it, and the trailer looked cool. So, cross your fingers that it looks even better when we actually get to see some more. Debuff is hosted by me, Steve Skeels, edited and mixed by Mason Carlton. Follow us on Instagram at DebuffPod. That's DebuffPod. Thanks for listening. I'll see you in the next one.